Michelle never imagined that signing one lease could feel like signing away her freedom. At first, it seemed like the answer to all her problems. A quiet apartment in a safe neighborhood of Atlanta, a fresh start after everything she'd been through. But she didn't know. Her new landlord, Mr. Harris, believed that paying rent wasn't enough. He thought tenants owed him something more. Control, obedience, ownership. And for Michelle, the nightmare started with something small. A knock on the door late at night. A question that wasn't his to ask. A look in his eyes that said this wasn't about rent anymore. It was about power. By the time she realized the truth, she was already trapped in a web she couldn't escape. Or at least, that's what Mr. Harris thought. Because what happened next turned into one of the most humiliating downfalls anyone in that town had ever seen. This is the story of a landlord who thought he owned her, and the big mistake that brought him to his knees. Stick around, because as Michelle's story unfolds, you'll discover not just how she exposed her landlord's darkest secret, but the powerful lesson hidden in her fight. That no one owns your voice, your dignity, or your freedom. And when you hear the shocking way Michelle flipped the script, you'll understand why people in Atlanta are still whispering about what she did that summer. Michelle Alvarez was 32 years old when she signed that lease. She had just moved to Atlanta, Georgia, clutching a suitcase, 2 duffel bags, and a heart full of promises she'd made to herself. No more running, no more second-guessing. This time, I'm building something that's mine. For years, Michelle had lived in survival mode. She had bounced between jobs, relationships, and cities, always chasing stability, but never quite catching it. After her mother passed away in North Carolina, Michelle packed up everything and decided to start over in Atlanta, a city she'd always dreamed of calling home. Her new job at a marketing firm was steady. Long hours, yes, but it paid enough to cover rent and groceries. The apartment she found wasn't luxurious, but it was a slice of peace. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, and sunlight that spilled across the kitchen every morning. But more than the apartment, it was the sense of independence that mattered. Michelle wanted to prove to herself that she could stand on her own 2 feet. She decorated slowly, 1 paycheck at a time. A thrifted couch, a secondhand dining table, curtains she stitched herself. On weekends, she'd light a candle, cook pasta, and sink in her tiny couch, whispering, "This is mine. Finally, this is mine." But in her effort to rebuild, she overlooked one thing: the man who owned the building, Mr. Gregory Harris. At first, he seemed like any other landlord. Mid-50s, neatly pressed shirts, a little too friendly but not alarming. He had a way of calling everyone kiddo, even grown adults, and laughing at his own jokes. Michelle didn't think much of it. She had signed a lease, paid her deposit, and moved in without much of second thought. But beneath his forced smiles, there was something Michelle couldn't quite place. A sharpness in his tone when tenants asked too many questions. A lingering stare that didn't belong in a landlord-tenant relationship. And soon little things started happening. At first, it was him checking in too often. A knock at 9 p.m., followed by a casual, just making sure everything's working fine in here. Or an email asking about her schedule. When she worked late, when she'd be home, when she'd be out. Michelle brushed it off. Maybe he was just thorough. Maybe it was Southern hospitality. But a pit began to form in her stomach, a quiet whisper that said, "This isn't normal." What Michelle didn't know yet was that Mr. Harris wasn't just watching. He was planning. And the boundaries she thought she had, the lock on her apartment door, would soon mean nothing at all. It started small. So small Michelle almost convinced herself she was imagining it. The first red flag came one Saturday morning. She had gone out early to grab groceries, her arms heavy with bags, and when she returned, she noticed something strange. Her apartment door was unlocked. Michelle froze, the weight of the bags digging into her fingers. She could have sworn she locked it before leaving. She always did. Her mom had drilled that habit into her since childhood. Locks are there for a reason, baby. Never forget. She pushed the door open cautiously, scanning the living room. Nothing seemed out of place. Her laptop was still on the table. Her thrift store TV sat untouched. The curtains hung just as she left them. Still, her chest tightened. She set the groceries down and checked every room. Nothing missing, nothing moved, just unlocked. When she brought it up to Mr. Harris later that afternoon, he laughed it off. "Kiddo, these old locks can be tricky. Probably just didn't latch all the way. I'll take a look at it tomorrow." He never did. 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time, Michelle was certain. She had locked the door, double-checked it, in fact. But when she came home, the deadbolt was turned, as if someone had entered and then locked it back on the way out. Her stomach churned. Something was wrong. She knocked on her neighbor's door. Mandy, a nurse who lived down the hall. "Hey, did you see anyone around my place today?" Michelle asked. Mandy shook her head. "Not that I noticed." "What?" Michelle hesitated, then forced a smile. "No reason. Just thought I heard something." But that night, she barely slept. Every creak of the building made her sit up. Every gust of wind through the window blinds made her heart pound. And then the texts began. At first, they seemed harmless. A reminder about rent. A message about the water being shut off for maintenance. But then came. "Saw your lights were on late last night. You should get more sleep. You've been walking to work a lot. Careful. Streets can be dangerous." Michelle read them over and over, her throat dry. How did he know what time her lights were off? How did he know her routine? One evening, she snapped. She texted back, "Mr. Harris, please keep our communication professional. Only contact me about apartment issues. Nothing personal." Minutes later, 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, his reply came. "Relax, kiddo. Just looking out for you. That's what good landlords do." Michelle's fingers hovered over the screen, but she didn't respond. And that was the moment she realized this wasn't care. This wasn't kindness. This was control. What she didn't know was that Mr. Harris had made a habit of this with other tenants before her. But Michelle wasn't like the others. She wasn't going to stay silent. The lines were being crossed. And soon, the real war for her freedom would begin. Michelle tried to brush it off at first. She told herself maybe she was overthinking. Maybe Mr. Harris was just old school and didn't realize how inappropriate his behavior was. But then the boundary crossing became impossible to ignore. One Tuesday evening, Michelle came home from work to find a note taped to her door. "I'll let myself in to fix your sink. Don't worry about thanking me." Her blood ran cold. She hadn't submitted a maintenance request, and when she stepped inside, she saw the truth. The sink was untouched, but her mail, stacked neatly on the counter that morning, had been shuffled through. Michelle's hands trembled as she grabbed her phone and called Mr. Harris. "Why were you in my apartment?" she demanded. His voice on the other end was maddeningly calm. "Kiddo, I own the place. I have every right to check in, make sure everything's working. You should be thanking me for being so attentive. You don't have the right to go through my things." A pause. His tone dropped, lower, colder. "Careful now. Don't forget whose roof you're living under." Michelle hung up, her heart pounding, fury battling fear. She had grown up watching her mother fight tooth and nail to keep their family safe, and now she understood what it felt like when safety itself was stolen. From that day on, she started noticing things. Her perfume bottle moved slightly on the dresser. A pair of shoes shifted by the door. Once, she found a faint imprint of someone having sat on her couch. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. Mr. Harris was entering her apartment. Mandy, the nurse down the hall, was the first person Michelle confided in. They sat together late one night, whispering over mugs of tea. "That man's been weird since the day I moved in," Mandy said, shaking her head. "He watches too closely, like he thinks we're part of the building he owns." Michelle clenched her jaw. "Well, he's about to find out he doesn't own me." The breaking point came the following Friday. Michelle was rushing to work when Mr. Harris blocked her at the entrance. "Rent's due Monday," he said, eyes narrowing. "I know," Michelle replied curtly. "You've been late before. Once. And I paid with a late fee." He leaned in, his voice low and oily. "You'd make things a lot easier on yourself if you were nicer to me. Tenants who cooperate don't have to worry about things like eviction notices." Michelle froze. There was the threat, naked and clear. For a moment, fear gripped her. Losing this apartment would mean moving back in with her mom, juggling 2 buses to get to work, maybe even losing her job. But then another feeling surged stronger, defiance. She looked him dead in the eye. "You don't own me, Mr. Harris. And if you ever step into my apartment again without permission, you'll regret it." His smirk faltered, just for a second, but Michelle caught it. The flicker of surprise that she had dared to push back. And in that instant, something shifted. The balance of power wasn't all his anymore. Michelle walked past him, her pulse racing, but her resolve firm. She wasn't going to be intimidated. What she didn't know was that this confrontation would trigger a battle far bigger than she imagined. A battle that would drag in lawyers, neighbors, and even the local press. Because Mr. Harris wasn't about to let go of his illusion of control. And Michelle? She wasn't about to let him win. Michelle spent the weekend restless, pacing her small apartment as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Every creak in the hallway, every distant knock made her skin crawl. But fear wasn't the only thing simmering inside her. Anger was there too, bubbling hotter with every memory of Mr. Harris's smirk. By Monday morning, she made a decision. She wasn't going to just react anymore. She was going to fight back. Her first call was to Mandy. "Do you still have those contacts from the tenant association you mentioned?" Michelle asked. Mandy's voice lit up with energy. "Are you ready to take him down?" Michelle exhaled. "I'm done being scared." That evening, Mandy brought over 2 other tenants, an older woman named Mrs. Alvarez and a college student named Janelle. As they sat around Michelle's kitchen table, Michelle realized she wasn't alone. Each woman shared her own story: unwanted visits, veiled threats, unexplained inspections. "This man thinks he owns us," Mrs. Alvarez muttered, fists clenched. Michelle nodded. "Then it's time to remind him he doesn't." The group decided to document everything. Every late-night knock, every suspicious entry, every word he uttered that crossed the line. Michelle even bought a small camera and set it up near her front door. And then it happened. 3 nights later, just after midnight, Michelle was jolted awake by the faint rattle of her doorknob. She froze, every nerve on fire, before realizing this was the moment. Quietly, she grabbed her phone, hit record, and tiptoed to the living room. The camera caught it all. Mr. Harris, fumbling with his keys, whispering to himself as though he were entitled to enter. "Just checking in, making sure she's safe. She needs me." Michelle's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just unlawful entry, it was obsession. She didn't confront him then. She waited until morning, when she marched straight to the Tenants Association meeting with the video in hand. The room buzzed as the footage played, neighbors gasping, whispering, some shaking their heads in disbelief. "Unbelievable," one man muttered. "That's breaking and entering," another woman cried. Michelle stood at the front, her voice steady. "This isn't just about me. It's about every single one of us who's been intimidated, who's been treated like property instead of people. He thinks he owns us, but he doesn't. And it's time we prove it." The room erupted in applause. From that night forward, everything changed. Michelle wasn't just a tenant anymore. She was the leader of a movement. But here's where things twisted. Mr. Harris found out about the meeting. And instead of backing down, he decided to push harder. A week later, Michelle received an official-looking envelope slid under her door. An eviction notice. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't just her home on the line anymore. If she gave in, the others would too. She called Mandy immediately. "He's trying to scare me out," Michelle whispered. Mandy's voice was fierce. "Then we'll scare him right back. This isn't over." And it wasn't. Not by a long shot. Because Michelle wasn't just going to fight the eviction. She was about to expose Mr. Harris in a way he never saw coming. On a stage far bigger than the 4 walls of their building. The eviction notice sat on Michelle's kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. Every time she walked past it, her chest tightened. She knew Mr. Harris expected her to pack up quietly, tail between her legs, and disappear. But Michelle had something he didn't count on. Courage backed by proof. The next morning, she took a deep breath and dialed the number Mandy had given her weeks ago, the local news station in downtown Atlanta. Her voice trembled at first. "My landlord, he's been harassing tenants, entering apartments without permission. I have video proof." By the time she hung up, her hands were shaking. But the reporter's last words stuck in her mind. "We'll send a crew. People need to hear this." That Friday, The tenants gathered in the courtyard. Cameras rolled as Michelle stood front and center, holding her phone like a weapon. She pressed play. On the screen, Mr. Harris's shadowy figure fumbled at her door, whispering, "She needs me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The reporter zoomed in on Michelle's face as she spoke. This is what we've been living with. Fear, intimidation. And it's not just me. He's been doing this to others. We deserve dignity. We deserve safety. And we will not be silent. The reporter leaned in, voice low but urgent. What do you want to happen? Michelle looked straight into the camera. Justice. Not just for me. For every tenant he thought he owned. Mr. Harris stormed into the courtyard mid-interview, face red, voice booming. You can't do this. This is my property. I make the rules here. The cameras whipped toward him. His anger only made him look worse. Michelle didn't flinch. No, Mr. Harris, this is our home, and you don't own us. The tenants broke into applause, their voices echoing against the building's walls. Mrs. Alvarez shouted, "Tell him, Michelle," while Janelle held up her own phone, recording everything. Mr. Harris sputtered, "You're all ungrateful. Without me, you'd have nothing." Michelle's reply cut through the noise like a blade. "Without us, you'd have no one to exploit." The crowd roared. Within hours, the story hit the evening news. Viewers across Georgia watched the footage, horrified by the landlord's behavior. Comments flooded social media. Unbelievable. He needs to be held accountable. Proud of Michelle for standing up. What a queen. By the next week, city officials announced an investigation into Mr. Harris's practices. Inspectors swarmed the building, uncovering a laundry list of violations. Broken fire alarms, mold, unsafe wiring. It wasn't just harassment, it was negligence on a dangerous scale. Mr. Harris's smug confidence crumbled. He wasn't barking orders anymore. He was scrambling for lawyers. And Michelle? She was suddenly the face of tenant rights in her community. But the real showdown came when the eviction case landed in court. Michelle stood tall in front of the judge, flanked by Mandy, Mrs. Alvarez, and Janelle. The courtroom buzzed with reporters and curious onlookers. Mr. Harris sat across from her, his once-polished suit wrinkled, sweat shining on his forehead. Michelle's lawyer presented the video. The whispers filled the room as Mr. Harris's muttering echoed through the speakers. "She needs me." The judge's face hardened. "Mr. Harris, this is not only a violation of tenant rights. It borders on criminal behavior." Michelle took the stand, her voice steady. "I just wanted to live in peace, to be safe in my own home. He thought he could control me, but he was wrong." The gavel came down. The eviction was thrown out. Mr. Harris was fined heavily and ordered to step down as landlord until further notice. And Michelle? She won the right to stay, and so much more. She walked out of that courtroom to cheers, neighbors hugging her, strangers thanking her for her courage. For the first time in months, Michelle felt something powerful: freedom. The morning after the verdict, the air in the apartment complex felt lighter. Children played in the courtyard without parents peering nervously out of windows. Doors that had once been double-locked now stood open, neighbors chatting freely again. Michelle stepped outside with a steaming cup of coffee, and for the first time in months, she breathed without tension sitting in her chest. The notice that once haunted her counter was gone, replaced by a letter of protection from the city, guaranteeing her and the other tenants the right to remain until new management was installed. Mrs. Alvarez shuffled over with a tray of fresh empanadas, smiling ear to ear. "You did it, Mija. You gave us our voice back." Michelle shook her head softly. "We did it. Together." Across town, Mr. Harris's face flashed on the evening news again, but not with the confidence he once wore. Instead, he looked smaller, weaker, as the anchor reported his charges and a long list of tenants pressing civil suits against him. Michelle didn't gloat. She didn't need to. His downfall spoke for itself. Weeks later, Michelle returned to her nursing shifts at the hospital, a quiet pride in her step. Patients smiled as she adjusted IVs, unaware of the storm she had just weathered. On her lunch break, she scrolled through her phone and saw a headline trending locally. "Tenant hero inspires new housing rights petition." She clicked. There was her story, sparking something bigger than her fight. Hundreds were signing, demanding stricter protections for renters across Atlanta. Michelle smiled. Her struggle hadn't just saved her home. It had become part of a larger change. That night, Michelle sat with Mandy on the balcony. The city lights shimmered beyond the skyline, and the hum of traffic filled the silence. "You know," Mandy said, "he really thought he owned you." Michelle let out a soft laugh, sipping her tea. He thought wrong. The two friends sat in peaceful quiet, knowing the storm had passed. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. For anyone listening, this story isn't just about a landlord's mistake. It's about the danger of underestimating someone's strength. It's about how silence doesn't mean weakness, and how one voice, backed by courage, can echo loud enough to change an entire community. So, the next time someone tries to strip away your dignity, remember Michelle's words. "You don't own me. You never did." Sparkles, if this story moved you, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more real stories with powerful life lessons. Because sometimes the greatest victories don't happen in silence. They happen when ordinary people decide they've had enough.